Welcome to Arguably. My name is Maral Salmassi, and today I'm joined by Florence Bergeaud-Blackler. Florence is an anthropologist and one of the leading researchers in Europe on Islamist networks, the Muslim Brotherhood, and what she describes as a broader normative system shaping parts of European societies, often below the radar of mainstream debate. What makes her work so compelling is that it moves beyond terrorism and looks at structures, economic networks, institutional influence, and the gradual embedding of ideology into everyday life. She has written extensively on the Halal economy, on what she conceptualizes as Frérisme, and on the alliances between Islamist actors and parts of the political and cultural left. Before we start, please subscribe and hit the like button. It really helps us grow the channel. Florence, it's great to have you here.
Hello.
You've said that the real issue in Europe isn't terrorism, but something much more embedded. What do you think people are still fundamentally getting wrong about Islamism today?
Well, people reduce Islamism to terrorism, generally speaking. And they think about terrorist attacks, bombings, knife attacks, spectacular violence. And that, of course, is a real threat. But when you focus only on terrorism, you miss the brain of the arm. What I've been studying for over 30 years now, when I discovered the Muslim Brotherhood in my neighborhood, it's a solid ideology, far more diffuse, far more passionate, and ultimately far more transformative of our secular societies. So, to summarize, the Muslim Brotherhood has several branches, at least two. One revolutionary and one reformist, to make it simple. The first is the Qutb branch, Said Qutb branch, and the other, which is of interest for us in Europe, is the reformists under the influence of Youssef el-Qaradawi and also Maulana Maududi. This later this reformist branch is adapted to our secular modern societies. It is a slow, methodological construction of a parallel normative system, a system of colonization that redefines what is permitted, halal, and what is forbidden, haram, what is pure and what is impure. And they do that in everyday life. And there has been, since the beginning of the Muslim Brotherhood in 1928, there has been several plans to Islamize the modern non-Muslim societies. The idea is to infiltrate all sectors, education, social network through NGO, medicine, law, the market also. Of course, the aim is not to impose Sharia, at least at first, but it's what they are doing is to make the society Sharia compatible, to change it from the inside. So, as you can see, terrorism attacks and what I call Frérismus or Brotherism or Frérisme in French does not act through violent confrontations. It operates within democracies using the very tools democracies provide: freedom of association, freedom of religion, and anti-discrimination law. And so it uses psychological subversive means to lull society, to anesthetize it, and to burden it with guilt through accusations of Islamophobia and racism. It exploits the weakness of the society it seeks to conquer. That is precisely what makes it too difficult to see and so difficult to confront.
So could you elaborate a little bit more on how Frérisme looks like in practice, please?
We decided to translate Frérisme in French by Frérismus in German, which means that the brotherism, it's not the Muslim Brotherhood itself as a brotherhood. It is the ideology, the method inspired by the brotherhood strategy. And it has been adapted and implemented in European democratic societies, also in the United States. In practical terms, it works like this. You create a dense network of associations, cultural, education, charitable, economic, and each one looks perfectly legitimate on its own. A youth club here, a women's association there, a halal certification body here, a think tank on Islamophobia, a publishing house, and so on, and so on. Individually, you don't see anything, but together they form a coherent ecosystem with a shared ideological orientation. So the difference is clear with jihadism. Jihadists want to destroy the system from the outside. Frérisme want to transform it from the inside, passionately, generation after generation.
So it's called it's some very similar to dawah. Would you agree?
It is that the dawah. They call it. They definitely call dawah. I would. This is a very long-term societal project, and to describe it, I would maybe propose 4 mechanisms. First, a normative control, the extension of halal and haram far beyond food into finance, cosmetics, tourism, through consumption. It creates a daily framework of obedience that structures the life of individual in the daily life. So that's the first of the 4 mechanisms. The second mechanism is the institutional entryism. So you insert people and ideas into existing institutions, so schools, universities, local government advisory bodies, platforms of any kind. You will not overthrow them, but you will gradually shift their norms and vocabulary and rules. The third mechanism is the capture of all Muslims. So for the Muslim Brotherhood, there is one ummah, and there's no other allegiance. There's no other nation. The nation state doesn't exist, doesn't make sense for Muslim Brotherhood. So for them, there is a ummah they claim to represent, and they represent themselves as legitimate interlocutors between the community, the Muslim community, and the state. So they create a sort of monopoly of representation. And the fourth mechanism is the economic halal economy. The idea is to build an economic ecosystem. So I said halal market, Islamic finance, certification bodies that generates both revenue, money, of course, and authority. Money and norms works together. They reinforce each other. We do not consume together with non-Muslim, Muslim and non-Muslim who do not consume together. It's a separate idea. It's halal tourism, halal food, halal way of life, as they say, and people are separated.
So it's this halal economy. You studied it thoroughly from what I've read online about your work. So what did you start noticing when you looked at it more closely? What I mean is this financial network. How far does it reach into our European societies?
What I discovered when I started to learn about halal market, it was more than 30 years ago, is that it's an invented market. What I mean by that is it was born in non-Muslim societies, because in Muslim societies everything is halal, so there's no halal ID because everything is licit, can be eaten. So halal started in an environment which is not Muslim, which is not Islamic. So in Europe, in the United States, in Australia, in New Zealand, you will see from the 1970s, 1980s, the formation of the halal market. At first, it's a meat market, and then it will become food market, and then it will become non-food market, and it grows for many years until that now you can find anything in the market in halal version. So, as I said, tourism, all economy, traveling, and whatever. Non-food, for example, cosmetic, and you can find it. And there is a parallel between the norm and the production. When you certify a product as halal, you must define what halal means. And you will not find it in the old text, of course, because you are address the industry. So someone must create the norm, inspect the norm, authorize it. And so, of course, it creates a market of certification, which is very competitive. And the more you are strict, and the more you're meant to be religious and have an authority. So the halal market is something which is which has a purpose, is to help the brotherism to create a halal way of life and grows through the continent and helping to do the dawah. What you say, you talk about dawah.
Yeah. But it's in that regard, it's a control mechanism, so to speak, because it's
normative control. Yes.
That's very interesting. Is it controlled from outside Europe, or are these institutions within Europe or America?
Okay, they are necessarily within Europe because the producer of any kind of consumer product are here. So you need people to control who have a credibility from a consumer perspective. So, of course, the Muslim of Berlin, for example, will not trust the Muslim from France or another country. They will prefer the product who are certified by the local certification. So yes, it doesn't come from outside. I would say that when a product comes from a Muslim country, there is less distrust. But when you produce product in Europe, then the distrust is high. So there is a need of certification bodies to reassure the consumers.
That's very interesting.
And these authorities will get more credibility. The more credibility they gain, they also gain money, of course, because the certification is not free. So you can make a lot of money and a lot of authority towards the community. Let's take an example. We have in France the Mosque of Paris, the Great Mosque of Paris, which is one of the oldest institution in France. And very recently, the trend is Algerian. It's very well connected to Algeria. And recently, the Mosque of Paris decided to have a contract with Algeria, and all the products who are going to Algeria have to be halal certified by the Mosque of Paris. That's very new. It gives, of course, a lot of money and power to the Mosque of Paris in a market, in an economic market, but as well in a religious market.
Are there different sects within these markets, like Shiites and Sunnis, that operate differently?
It doesn't really work this way. I mean, Shia and Sunni. I mean, I would say, for example, in France, that there are many Sunni, very few Shia. Of course, this distinction will work, but to a certain point. It depends on the product. If it is in the interest of the market players and the religious players to be the more wide possible, to attract the most high number of consumers. So they don't really play the ethnicity. They try to be
in broad sense, Islamic.
Yeah, in a broad sense, halal as Muslim.
I understand. So it's an extensive system, economic certification structure system that functions as nodes of authority and influence within Europe.
When I started 30 years ago, we could see the ethnic distribution because people knew the butcher personally, so they knew that he was coming from the village. So, there are personal, but now it's the industry. So people just rely on industrial labels, and the people who are making these labels, who are doing the certification of these labels, do not want to have ethnic distribution. They want to represent halal as Muslim thing.
As an economy of the ummah, so to speak.
Yes.
It's a very collectivist ideology to begin with.
It is the idea. It doesn't mean that they are not capitalists. They are. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Little merchants, and they are. But but the idea is to serve the community, and the interest of the marketplace and the religious players are the same. And this is, for me, this is a problem, because I think when you are a market players who is not Muslim, you're playing, you're acting for the distribution of a fundamentalist norm, because obviously these certification bodies display, produce in the societies a fundamentalist norm by calling all the time halal, haram, halal, haram, halal, haram. So you're in a sense, if you're a Muslim, you're a prisoner of this
value system,
and you're under the control of the group. So even if you're not a practice Muslim, you don't want to eat halal, then the community around you, your family, your neighborhood will look at what you eat. So this is what I explained to the non-Muslim merchants. You're acting not in a sense of the democracy and the freedom of choice and the real freedom of choice. You're acting by making a community system, and it will be negative to you at a point, because if you're not a Muslim, then you will always find somebody to tell you, are you doing a real halal? So the distrust will be turned to the merchant, to the market player. And sometime you will have market player who can be ruined by the fact that they try to make their product halal, but it's never halal enough, and they finish by losing their business. It happens quite frequently.
Yeah, there was this story recently. I watched a few clips online, and there was this story about this Sikh Indian man, a shop owner in the UK in London, and he refused to offer halal food, and he was targeted violently by the community surrounding his shop. That was severe. It has consequences, obviously, to decide not to offer halal food if you happen to have your shop in a district where there is a Muslim majority community.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's a matter of, well, they explain it, it's a matter of licit, illicit, and that's it, you can choose, not choose. But actually, it means also pure and impure. So that means that if you sell halal thing, it should not be presented next non-halal things. So that this idea of contamination. And this is not compatible with democracy. It's compatible with system of caste, where you divide the world between pure and impure, but it's not compatible with any democracy system. So this is, for me, a high preoccupation to see that in some cities in France and in Europe, you have quarters where you can not go and live without to be halalized.
I think one branch of this brotherhood network is also, as you mentioned, it's charity work.
Yeah.
Charity work. So what kind of networks start to emerge across Europe right now? What could you observe over the, let's say, last decade?
So the idea of Muslim Brotherhood at first, when they arrived in Europe, was to come back in their countries. They were just coming for a few years in America, in Europe, in the campus, to be together, to not be arrested and sometimes tortured in their country of origin. So they just wanted to prepare the way they would do the revolution back. For the Iranians, it's what happened. They were in a campus in Europe and in the United States. And finally, they could follow Ayatollah Khomeini, who in 1979, when he took power. But for the others, for example, the Egyptians, and you can count amongst them Said Qutb, which is a very important ideologue of the Muslim Brotherhood. He came back to Cairo, and was jailed and hanged. So the other were not just very enthusiastic to come back. And also they have another problem. You are not allowed to live in a non-Muslim country if you are a good Muslim, because it's not the Dar al-Islam. So they decided to, because they could not come back to Islam, then to ask Islam to make Islam coming to Europe. So the idea was to do the dawah and to convert the population. And of course, the population was without Muslim heritage. So they focused on migration. The immigration at first, in 1970s, was the first really massive immigration from Muslim countries. And but it didn't really work, because these people sometimes flee the regime they were coming from. And but so the Muslim Brotherhood decided to look at their children, to teach their children to their Islam, their integralist and fundamentalist Islam. So this is the first and second and now third or fourth generations of Muslim born in Europe who were influenced by the Brotherhood. So to answer your questions, the idea was first of all to teach them what is Islam, what they call the true Islam, to make sure that all the activities of the young people, sport, culture, whatever, school, were framed or at least compensate by their education. In France, it's a very secular education. So they have a program to really make sure that they will not listen to this education. But when they come back at home and the weekend and when they don't have school, they will be teach something completely different, which is the true Islam. They have a program for that. They have written this, which is called the strategy. It was published in 2000 by the OIC, and it's the strategy of for the cultural Islamic in the world. Sorry, I don't remember the title exactly. But this program of 30 or 40 pages explain how the Islam should make sure that or Muslims that the Muslim of a Western country should never integrate or assimilate. So all their actions have been turned to this strategy. And now we have 3 or 4 generations of young Muslim, and we discovered recently by several polls that they prefer Sharia law as the Republican law. I give you a number: 58% of the less 25 years old say that they prefer to live in a country under Sharia law than Republican law. So, and the problem is we were completely enthusiastic about multicultural and
multiculturalism and so on,
diversities, and we haven't seen. I mean, I don't put myself in this way, but generally speaking, we haven't seen this trend coming. And now in France, we just have local elections, and so now we have this generation coming to politics with very openly communitarist and Islamist view, which is for most people totally unexpected. While at least I think we should have seen it 30 years ago. It was already there, but it's just now that we realize the problem.
Yeah, it's very similar to Germany. They recently released results of a research that was conducted over the last 5 years, and almost 50% of adults below 40 had what you would call Islamist views on governance and so on.
And if you say it, you will be said as an Islamophobia. Islamophobic.
You will be accused of Islamophobia.
And you will be accused to be racist and so on. And it's really, really violent, especially in social networks. For example, myself, I've been when my book on brotherism was published 3 years ago, I was very seriously threatened, and I'm still under police protection all the time.
Yeah.
As a researcher.
This is insane. Well, I mean, one of the more controversial aspects of your work is the relationship between Islamist actors and parts of the political left. This kind of political violence isn't something we see only from the Islamist side. It's also a very significant marker of the far left, today's far left. So and how did that convergence emerge?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a long story. It's not new. This alliance was visible in Iran in 1979, and we know that what happened to the left. So the convergence they have, I mean, it's their view of a revolution, and one wants to make a revolution and redesign all the class relation. But that's it. It's not really a program. It's not. While the others, the Muslim Brotherhood, they have a complete program of life from the morning to the evening and during the night and in all parts of your life with your relation. Everything is codified by Islam. For the left, the Muslim were the real revolutionary force because they wanted something new and to fight the Western societies, the capitalism, and so that's the view of the leftists. But the Islamists are not like this. It's complete misunderstanding. Islamist is not ready to make the revolution in the sense of the left. They just want a theocracy. The democracy, they don't believe in democracy. They want a theocracy because they believe in God and they believe God say everything you have to do in the life. But the Islamists are more clever. They are good politics, and they know that the leftists can be useful to them because they can do the revolution. They can fight. They can be what we say in French, the chair à canon. The flesh for the war, so they are useful. Some people say useful idiot, for example, but at least they are useful. Left is useful for Islamists, and they know it for. I mean, they've been knowing it for half century. The left had problem with the Islamists because they thought, okay, but they believe in God and we don't. So there have been many discussions within the left, and they decide to take the individuals, but not the collective. So okay to be with the Islamist, but not under Islamism. But that's a pure illusion, of course. It doesn't work this way. So Islamism, at the end of the day, is going to win. In France recently, so you have the party La France Insoumise, which is a radical left party, and for me, it is like for Islamists, it is like a cuckoo nest. The cuckoo is this bird which make their eggs in a nest of other birds. You see, so the Islamists do that. They don't create their own parties because they know that Democrats will never accept theocrats. So they put their eggs in a leftist party. So this is the strategy of cuckoo, and the result is today that this nest is growing Islamist birds, and so more and more they are influenced by Islamism and led by them.
These parties, these actually democratic parties, more leftist parties, incubate the Islamist ideology. Probably also the actors, the politicians, and provide the infrastructure for their.
Yes, exactly. They provide everything, the network, infrastructure, so it facilitates their spreading in societies. Now they have some commune, little cities around France, and so they will finance and they will support some network that facilitating the practice of their Islam. They will use, they have been doing that for 30 years, so now they are quite powerful.
So they are creating Islamist societies, parallel societies within our societies,
I would say parallel. I wouldn't say parallel, because parallel would mean that a community and next another community, but they are inserting and they are changing the whole societies. So it's not just community parallel. They are growing parallel, of course, but they
take over.
They are working within the society to take over, but by changing the rule, changing the culture, by the demography as well, because they have a plan, they have a project. The leftists don't have a plan anymore.
Yeah. What's really dangerous is, and this is something I feel most politicians on the left have absolutely a blind spot there, because these radicals are radicalizing the moderate Muslims, the, let's say, liberal Muslims. They are turning them into Islamists too. It's
because you can't resist. I mean, I'm not sure they are turning them into Islamists, but at least they make them quiet.
We have been observing the radicalization of the youth here in Germany. If you look at previous generations, they didn't have these radical views.
It's true.
Yeah, but now the third, fourth generation of Muslim youth, they have been quite radicalized. They have very radical views on Sharia and so on. Some would say
there's a lot of predicators through the social networks. They read Salafi literature. So sometimes you hear people say, but they don't know Islam, they don't know what they are talking about. That's why they prefer Sharia, but they don't know. But actually, they know what they are talking about. More and more literature, Islamist literature, very easy in internet or in Islamic library. It's 90% of Salafi books.
Yeah, it's spread through very radical preachers on TikTok and social media in general, YouTube. I feel like these young men are rather radicalized online than in mosques nowadays. Most of them are.
A mosque is a space. I would say. Not sad, but it's still a meditation space. But in internet is a very nice video. You can see people living outside, expressing. They are, of course, they are good looking. They are nice, but what they say is sometimes horrible. But they say it's smiling and nice. And you can see also women completely covered and saying, I'm so happy of my choice. We have influences. We have Islamist influences in Germany too. Some of them are even Germans. They're converts. But what I've also noticed is that the radicalization is also facilitated through the Palestinian narrative. This is something through anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. This is something we have been observing
as an eruption. It's really, that's the correct term. It's an eruption since October 7th, but it has started, I'd say it has started at a very alarming pace since 2015, I would say. So, that
I saw that as soon as the early 90s, because I was working as an anthropologist in a Muslim Brotherhood mosque, and it was already there. So it was exactly the same image of children of Gaza and of this suffering,
the blood libels, yes,
and they were explaining to the youth, it's going to happen to you because you are Muslim. So this connection between Gaza children and the children of Muslim children of Europe, it was already there in 1990s. So this indoctrination was already very violent. And if you don't do that, you will go to hell. And if you do that, you will not go to hell. You will go to paradise, but you have to. But it's only God would choose. So, and God can see you every time, at every second of your life. It's extremely heavy for young children. And the Gaza has been also in France since October 2023, an explosion, but the structures and the discourses and the people, the actors were already there. It was just better organized.
Much better.
Because of the media and the mainstream media were also,
but also Al Jazeera. The force of Al Jazeera, the power they have, not only in the Arab world, but since they have started with Al Jazeera International, it's insane. These narratives
do you have Al Jazeera for young people in Germany?
No, I think it's English, but English version of Al Jazeera is consumed by a lot of Muslim youth.
No, I say that because we in France, in the Francophone area, we have AJ Plus. AJ Plus is the Al Jazeera for young, and it's really, really perverse because it's pro-Islamism and pro-LGBTQ and so on. So it's really the propaganda which goes to the heart of the youth.
But it is, it's remarkable because if you compare BBC Persian to AJ Plus, there are a lot of similarities. It's alarming. So it shows the extent of infiltration within European or Western media, the Islamist infiltration within Western media, which is understandable given the billions of Qatari money that is flowing into media. They have bought themselves into the film industry, movie industry, media in general, music industry. They're everywhere. They're inside every aspect of culture nowadays.
Yeah. And the leftists are very good for spreading culture, new culture, and good trends. Qatar money, of course, is very important. There's another provider of money and ideas is the European Union, who sponsor and fund projects on Islamophobia, where you learn to love the hijab, the beauty in the hijab, the liberty in the hijab. It's incredible. And
it's perverse.
And we don't have any. I mean, it happens, and you have a campaign with big and nobody say anything. You have sometime a deputy or another, but the trend is going. We have written with Tommaso Virgili, a researcher working in a research center in Berlin. We have published a report on the money given by the EU on project on Islamophobia. It's millions and millions. And when you have this money from the EU, you can go to your mayor, you can go to your local, and they will give more money. So at least you will be, at the end of the day, you will be very rich and very powerful in making network. So yes, the Qatar, but also the EU, also the Turkey. You have, and we know that I've been knowing that for many, many years, and nothing is done.
Yeah, and Islamophobia is a term that was introduced by the Iranian regime in the 90s.
I know this theory, but I'm not sure. I think the one who really have introduced this and developed it, it's a British think tank which calls the Runnymede Trust.
What is it called?
Runnymede, Runnymede, Runnymede Trust. And so they have been written the first report on Islamophobia. And it's very interesting to see it. I developed that in my book on Brotherism. To summarize, they explain that if you fear of Islam, if you do not agree with Islam, you just have to understand that Islam is what it is, and you have to change your mind and your view on it. It's incredible. And for me, this is the way, this is very much influenced by the Muslim Brotherhood, who since the beginning have explained, and was many, many years before Iran, that their first focus is to make sure that the Western societies will change their view on Islam. So it was already there much before Iran. It's also
I think Iran was influenced by Brotherhood too, by
Said exactly. So I would put this way: there is a base, Islamic base of this Islamophobia. It's the defensive jihad. You know, you have two types of jihad. You have the jihad offensive. You can declare jihad against a non-believer, and you have the defensive. So you have the right to declare jihad if you're attacked as a Muslim or your community is attacked. But otherwise, you're not allowed to declare jihad for attacking purposes. The only possibility to declare jihad is to have a caliphate. For example, in 2014, when the caliph was born in Syria, then there was a caliph, so he was able to declare the jihad against the Western countries. But otherwise, it's forbidden. So the only jihad you can use is the defensive jihad to defend yourself from a non-believer who would like to make your life as a Muslim impossible. So you see the link between Islamophobia. If you prevent me to wear the veil in the school, then you're Islamophobic. So I have the right to fight against you. If you prevent me to eat halal in a canteen, then you are aggressing me. So, you are Islamophobic, so I can fight you back. And, it's very, it's
a very interesting concept. But in Germany, they have even taken it a little further than a phobia. In English, the term is Islamophobia, so an irrational fear of Islam, so to speak. But in Germany, we have now a new terminology. It's called, it's basically, if you translate it word for word, it's anti-Muslim racism. So they basically declared that Islam is a race. which is an absurd concept.
Yeah. I mean, Muslim Brotherhood network make sure that in France we will sing the same as in Germany or in England. Of course. Also hate. The Muslim hate. All these things just covering the same thing is that you don't touch to Islam, because otherwise you will be accused to hate
but this
or anything.
It's a sly method. So you basically attach an idea to a person, because in general, I'd say people have rights, but ideas don't. So you're allowed to scrutinize any idea, including any religion. We are allowed to criticize Christianity. We're allowed to criticize any other religion. But attaching it to a person and making it, a race. So it's basically a hate crime. It makes it a hate crime. Otherwise, it would be just a criticism of an idea. So it's very, very interesting.
Sacrilege. But we have to understand that they want a theocratic order. So in their theocratic order, it makes sense. But for us, it's unacceptable, and they know that for us it's unacceptable. This is why they are fighting against us by very soft means, by using subversive means, because they know that we will never agree with them.
But why do European institutions struggle to identify or address these dynamics effectively?
Well, I think that it reflects all the EU countries. I suppose in Germany it's the same. You have what we call clientelism. Political parties are very often in the impossibility to rule a city without the Muslim vote. So if you take Brussels, for example, which is one of the worst cases in Europe, there's no party who can win anymore without the Muslim vote. So who makes the rule? The brothers who are controlling this Muslim vote. And this is the way it is now. I mean, if we had reacted 10 years ago, it would have been easier. 10 years ago, when 2015, le Bataclan, Charlie Hebdo, it was the time to react. But instead of reacting, we focused on jihadism. It's what I said at first in our meeting. And we haven't seen that the Islamists and the Brotherists came to advise us. They came and said, okay, we do not agree with jihadism. We will explain you what is a real Islam. And if you make sure that the Muslims are in a real Islam of peace, then everything will be fine. And it's the way they have deceived us.
Yeah, that is subversion. So what are the consequences for a society if these dynamics remain unaddressed? Because that is what we are starting to notice. Things are changing rapidly.
Well, I used to explain that the brother wanted to make the society Sharia compatible before to impose the law. What I noticed during the several months past is that now they are taking some cities. If you take Roubaix, which is very close to Molenbeek, in all sense of term. So that's high worry for me, because when they will take the politics, then it will be a model that they will spread elsewhere in Europe, in France and in Europe. And that is the latest stage. And after we'll have to fight to, if we want to save the democracy, we will have to fight. So the future is the war in this case.
You think it will get to a state of civil war? I hope not.
Oh, I think nobody wants that, even them. But I don't see the situation is so bad that in some area, not everywhere, fortunately, but in some area like north of France, around Paris, it is not controllable. This is why we are there. It's because nobody in the government want to take a decision, because they know that if they take a decision, people will go out with the Kalashnikov, because they have Kalashnikov already in the suburb. So there will be blood, and nobody wants to assume that this position.
We see it also in Sweden is experiencing an insane rise in bombings and crime. It's unprecedented. It's crazy.
Look at the UK; it's the same. Yeah, very bad situation in UK.
Yes, UK is also on the decline.
So it's coming to America as well, but Americans are... I've been to Washington recently, and I could see that Americans are looking at Europe as saying, okay, they are lost. So they really think we are lost. I explained that we are not, but you know.
But they have Dearborn too, you know that.
Yeah, and often I say, okay, but if we are lost, you will be losing very, very soon as well, because it's the same mechanism. And so I think that this is the way we could go out this situation. It's also to compare the situation from one country to others. It means that we have to cooperate with Americans, between Europeans, and to make sure to do what they are doing. If we have a good experience somewhere, we should explain to the other that we succeed. And we should exchange we also have to change the organization in the university. Because at the moment it's taken by the leftists. So all courses or lessons on Islamism is just forbidden. I could give conference everywhere except in the university. So
that is insane.
This knowledge is absolutely not known from the youth, and this is particularly dramatic, because youth is the adults of tomorrow. This is also something which should be of concern.
What I've observed is that they have been indoctrinated to believe that criticizing Islamism equals racism. Decolonialism, imperialism, all these ideas, these outdated ideas and frameworks, it's very, very difficult for the young generation to free themselves from these concepts, particularly if you're in an environment where, you can get cancelled easily. The universities are also infiltrated with powerful and very pernicious actors. Generation after generation, they are poisoning the minds of these young people. One of the most significant scholars playing such a role, for instance, Edward Said, these people who introduced these concepts
the controversy between Said and Lewis.
We have a lot of work to do.
Yes. Well, what is good is that with the social network or broadcasts like yours, we can talk to each other from one country to another. It makes networking, even if it was not our intention. The fact is that we observe the same thing everywhere.
There needs to be a lot more education on these topics in universities, and I think history lessons. There is a lot of revisionism that is being taught in universities as well.
Yeah. I mean, since the 2003, the 7th of October, it has been revisionism.
Yeah.
I mean, on all aspects, it's incredible. And since with the Iran war, it's also what we see. I mean, the left supporting Khamenei and the regime of Ayatollah. I mean, it's like, it's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. Women, blonde women with posters of Khamenei and IRGC flags. It blows our minds. And these women have completely erased Afghani women, Iranian women, Sudanese women, all these women who suffer, directly suffer the consequences. Yeah. That is that is an entire episode. We should definitely speak about this fake feminism in the next episode.
There's so much to say.
Yeah. Yes. Florence, thank you so much. Your work brings a level of clarity that's urgently needed in this debate. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Maral. Thank you very much.